And we're back. Today on the Try Hard Fantasy Football Podcast, we will recap Week 5 games in the NFL. But first, it's time to own up. It's time to pay the piper. It's time to repent for my mistakes. Brian has finally won a game in DFS. Congratulations, Brian.
I mean, thank you, but finally, I beat you the first week of the season as well. So this isn't exactly the first time I beat you, and I destroyed you for most of last year when we didn't really keep track officially. But
When I
yeah,
didn't
you've
know
gotten
how
the
to play
better of me thus
DFS.
far this season. But I came back with a dominating victory in week 5.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you didn't squeak out a win. You didn't sweat till the end at all. It was very close. Um, but let's quickly go over that DFS because as the loser, I think it's my opportunity to learn, right? It's my opportunity to further my knowledge to get what I can from the victorious party. So Brian, I have a question for you. You decided to use the same strategy that failed you before and get less points than you usually do, but this time it worked. This time I screwed up. So why did you decide to go with the same strategy before, getting less points than normal? By strategy. Sorry,
So
by
what
strategy
I
I
think
mean
you're trying to ask
two
me.
some really expensive running backs, and punting, like just totally punting on everything else. So Brian, why did you decide to do that
Okay.
again?
Uh, Yeah, so first of all, I'll tackle the running back prices. So yeah, once again this week I went with three high price running backs: Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Mike Davis, and Ezekiel Elliott. Though I would argue Mike Davis isn't exactly a top tier high price running back because he was only 6,400. So usually the expensive guys I consider 7K and above, but did certainly pay up for running backs. And to be honest, that wasn't a strategy I was trying to repeat this week. I think you caught on to something earlier in the year, Steve, that this was a year to pay down at running back because passing offenses have been so fantastic and seemingly will continue to be fantastic this season, in part because we are seeing fewer penalties called than ever. And so that obviously helps the passing game a lot. When you're not calling offensive holding, when you're not calling offensive pass interference, it's much easier to get the passing attack going. And so receivers have been paying off. But what happened this week is when I looked at the prices, which I think a lot of people did, they saw running backs were underpriced. And Ezekiel Elliott was the first one. He was the most expensive player on my team, the second most expensive non-quarterback on the slate. He was at 7,800. To me, that's just way too cheap for him. He was a free square to me in kind of like 50-50 head-to-head type games because he doesn't even need to score touchdowns to be valuable at that price. He gets 25 touches a game and he gets all the high leverage touches, so it's likely he scores touchdowns. He scored 2 this week, and that made him worthwhile. Similarly, Mike Davis was just way underpriced. Steve, you played him too at 6,400. He's getting Christian McCaffrey's volume, and he is 60% of Christian McCaffrey's price tag. McCaffrey was 10K in weeks 1 and 2. So Mike Davis was just way too cheap. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire is actually one I struggled with. I didn't love him all week, and kind of fell into the trap of hearing everyone else in the world hype up CEH and ended up playing him. I preferred Josh Jacobs, who was still 6,300, still kind of expensive, and would have been much better off going down to him. But basically, these were just really good plays. And on top of that, Darius Slayton was my favorite wide receiver play, and he was only 4,800. And Daniel Jones, I thought, was a really good play at 5,400. And so those were just cheap guys I could go to as opposed to guys I had to put in to fit in my running backs.
How did Danny Dimes work for you?
Not well. So I really thought he was a great play given how porous the Dallas secondary has been all season. And I preferred Daniel Jones to Teddy Bridgewater. Now, I was wrong in that Bridgewater vastly outscored Daniel Jones, I think at like over a 2-to-1 pace. But I was right on my reason for not playing Bridgewater, and that was his ceiling, I thought, was capped at 23, 24 points. I thought his absolute ceiling in any given game, even against a team like the Falcons, is right at 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. And that's pretty much exactly what he did. 313 yards, 2 touchdowns, got you about 23 DraftKings points. That's good. That's great for 5,900, but it's not a massive upside. Conversely, I thought Daniel Jones had a shot for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns. Obviously, he didn't get anywhere near that, but I do feel good about my process for deciding not to play Bridgewater, even though he would have been a much better play.
Uh, I mean, I'm not going to argue with that. I mean, it also kind of helped that Alley Cox and Cooper and Juju Smith-Schuster combined for what, less than 10 points?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, your high price receivers really didn't pay off. I don't know what happened to Amari. I watched that whole game. He was on the field. I thought he was injured, and nobody said anything for the first, 20 minutes of the game. But he was on the field, just didn't get targeted, and yeah, that didn't pay off for you. Of course, that didn't. That's the same. I actually think my worst process pick was George Kittle this week. Um, I think I'll admit I was chasing the box score from a week ago when he had 15 catches, over 180 yards, and a touchdown, and didn't really think through the fact that Garoppolo was coming off a fairly severe ankle sprain, and that probably wouldn't be 100% even as they put him in. And so Kittle's actually what I thought was my worst play going on. I don't mind that Zacchaeus got 2 points. He was only 3K. Like, he allowed me to pay up and fit in Slayton, Anderson, and my three running backs. So happy with all that. But overall, I thought it was a good week, and this was a good lineup. It scored well above the 50 percentile threshold in order to cash in 50-50s. So I like my lineup.
So let's move into the week 5 recap show. So Brian, give us a little bit of a massive overview of the week, like a 10,000 foot overview of the week.
I mean, I think from a fantasy perspective, it was just a week where you had to adapt and survive. I mean, we had 3 games essentially moved or canceled that we weren't really counting on. Now, the Bills and Titans are actually going to play now, but the game got moved to Tuesday. And if you're like me, I had multiple teams, including some important matchups where I had Bills players like Stephon Diggs, and ended up benching him because I couldn't rely on that game being played on Tuesday, and I didn't have another option. Ended up putting in Henry Ruggs in that league, and that worked out really well because Ruggs got a long touchdown. We'll talk about him later a little bit. But yeah, I mean, you had to guess on the Bills, and if you left your Bills in, it's probably going to pay off. But the Patriots and Broncos got canceled, and that's changing the whole dynamic of the schedule for the rest of the year and a bunch of stuff. And so it was really a hectic week. And I think we're going to have a lot more of that going forward. I think it's going to be really important to manage your entire roster from now on, including all your bench spots, to make sure that next week, when a random game is suddenly moved to Tuesday or maybe canceled, you have a guy to put in there just in case.
So for that, how would you handle this? Let's say if you're a commissioner or a player, like in a fantasy football league.
So what I did in the leagues that I'm commissioner of is I made a rule, and I emailed my whole league about this and posted in the league message board, that if a game is canceled with more than a day's notice or a couple days, as the Steelers game was last week, that you just had to make do. You had to rearrange your roster, and you had to add or drop players as necessary to fill your lineup. But if a game is moved or canceled with less than 24 hours before Sunday, before the Sunday noon game starts, then you can play a player from the postponed game or possibly canceled game. And either you can email me your chosen replacement for that player if the game doesn't go off. So, for example, if you had played Stephon Diggs this week, you could email me, the commissioner, and tell me which player you want to count if Stephon Diggs doesn't play. Or alternatively, if you don't email me but stuck Diggs in your lineup and the game is canceled due to COVID, I would look back and plug in your highest projected wide receiver from your bench if you had one, and you just get that person's points. Now, I wouldn't take necessarily the highest scoring player, just the highest projected player, on the assumption that that's who a default person would pick to fill in that spot if they had known Diggs was out, without me making any
That's some
judgment. So
commitment.
yeah, so it's a little extra work for the commissioners, but I think it's worth it and important. And for example, I'm in a league where we have 4 bench spots, no IR, so it's just kind of crazily shallow for your roster, and no way to really deal with COVID, and it's very annoying. And I really wish a commissioner in that league, for example, would take some time to make adjustments to the league so that we can prepare and plan for this stuff, because I think it's going to happen often throughout the rest of the season.
All right, let's break it down team by team. So before we start, Brian and I we'll break down the fantasy relevance, but just for fun, we also pick the winners of the games. So far this season, Brian is 46 and 30. I am 45 and 31, so we're basically neck and neck. I was down by 2 games last week. Now I'm only down by 1 game. Brian picked some upsets against the spread, and he is 0 and 3 last week because he chose the Jaguars, the Colts, and the 49ers. Why? I don't know.
Yeah,
And
that was rough.
I I pick an upset game, just a clear winner. And I said you could bet your house, you could mortgage your house, you could take out your 401k and put it all on the Panthers. And I was right. That wasn't a hard choice. But yeah, that was technically an upset. All right, so let's start. Arizona Cardinals. Kenyon Drake. There's a person named Kenyon Drake on the Arizona Cardinals. I know not of this. I know not of this person. I only know of the name Chase Edmonds,
I wish
and I know that next year Chase Edmonds is going to be a top 10 pick overall, and let everyone down. But yeah, tell us. Do you think this is Chase Edmonds' team moving forward?
Is his team? No, but I do think he is now the more valuable running back in Arizona in PPR leagues. Drake is still getting the vast majority of the carries. He got 18 against the Jets to Edmonds 3, but Edmonds was targeted 6 times, had 5 catches for 56 yards, while Drake only had 1 catch. And obviously, Edmonds getting the targets is more valuable in an offense that likes to pass on an overwhelming percentage of downs, and in a PPR league where every catch gets you an extra point, whereas you don't get anything for a rush. And if a running back is averaging 3 yards a carry, you really don't get anything. So I actually now prefer Edmonds to Drake, and hopefully you have them both. If you drafted Kenyon Drake early, you picked up Edmonds as a backup. But if you don't, there may be better running backs. And Steve, you're shaking your head. I'm assuming you would prefer to just pick a running back from a different team.
Yes, yes. Especially since Kyler Murray is getting a bunch of the rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, so I mean, Murray's been crazy. He's got 5 rushing touchdowns in 5 games this year, and the question really is, can he keep it up? I don't think he's going to finish the year with 16 rushing touchdowns. That would best even what Lamar Jackson did by a lot from last season. But he is a threat around the goal line, and we saw that against the Jets. They gave it to Kenyon Drake on first down. He failed, not surprisingly, and then Kyler ran it in on second down.
All right. Next up, the Atlanta Falcons, the coachless Atlanta Falcons. Who is their backup? Are they putting the OC in
They're
for as
they're
coach?
throwing their actually, I think he was just like the wide receivers coach, but Raheem Morris, he is a former head coach. He's going to take over the head coaching duties for Atlanta for the rest of the year. Obviously he didn't do well in his previous stints as a head coach, so I don't expect a lot here. And Atlanta's just a bad team, so I don't think it's going to have a lot of dramatic impact on the roster or how we view the Falcons going forward. This isn't like Bill O'Brien leaving the Texans, where I think where Deshaun Watson can get emotional and carry his team. I don't see Matt Ryan doing that. I don't see anyone in Atlanta doing that.
He sounds like the kind of guy that wants to establish the run early on.
Good luck with
Do you
that
think
with
so?
Todd Gurley as your running back.
Well, he's not doing terrible. I mean, he does. All he does is score touchdowns.
It's true. I mean, he's got 5 touchdowns on the year. Looked really good against the Panthers, though every running back for the last season and a half has looked good against Carolina. But Gurley put up
Yeah.
120 yards, 121 yards and a touchdown against the Panthers. I don't think we should expect to see that kind of production going forward, but I do think the fact that Gurley's old, way past his prime, and not what he's used to, is causing us to undervalue him a bit, just from the workload he's getting, because it has been consistent, if not fantastic. He's gonna finish as an RB2 this year. He's gonna be a top 22 running back just because he gets all the touches that he needs to get there.
So you might get some value back on your draft pick.
Yeah, hopefully.
I don't know that I'm targeting him in DFS ever.
DFS, no. I mean, when he plays Carolina again later in the season, I guess maybe. But yeah, other than that, he's probably not a target for me in DFS. And I don't know. I wouldn't go out of my way to trade for him in season long unless I was desperate for a running back. You might be able to get him pretty cheap.
Are the Baltimore? Let's move on. Baltimore Ravens. Are they too good to care about getting Lamar Jackson numbers?
Possibly their defense might be too good for it to matter. Really, this game, Lamar looked bad once again. Only 180 yards passing, barely over 50% completion percentage. And only ran for 3 yards, which is the big concern. Though he was banged up earlier in the week. He missed practice on Wednesday with a knee injury. Missed practice Thursday as well, but they said that was a stomach bug. I am kind of concerned about him. He hasn't topped 204 yards since week one, and he only has one game with over 9 rushing attempts, whereas last year he was averaging 12 rushing attempts a game. I have concerns that he's not going to be the dynamic player. That being said, he's still a good fantasy quarterback. You're not dropping him. I doubt anyone wants to sell low on him, but I wouldn't target him in a trade. You just kind of, if you drafted him in the second, third round, you lost some value, and you just kind of got to live with it for now.
So good matchup. Actually, good. So last week was a good matchup, but the defense just took over that game, and so Lamar Jackson, I think his numbers suffered quite a bit. So let's say a close matchup. Do you take Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray and DFS?
Probably still Murray. I mean, Murray's running the way Jackson was last season, and we've seen Jackson in what should have been good matchups. He didn't do anything against the Chiefs. I mean, he had an okay game, but he looked bad. Like he's just missing throws. He's regressed as a passer, and I think that really hurts him because it seems Baltimore is trying to move their offense forward in a way that they don't rely on Jackson to run for 80 yards a game because that puts him at risk.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Do you care that J.K. Dobbins is terrible?
Sorry.
Do you care that J.K. Dobbins is terrible?
No, I don't think he's terrible. I just don't think the Ravens need any one running back to do anything. So they split the touch-ins among 3 different running backs about equally.
All right. Let's move on. The Bills, the Carolina Panthers.
Your
The
favorite team
Panthers.
to talk about. We'll just sit here for 15 minutes and let you.
I told you. I tried to tell you. I tried to tell you before the season that the Carolina Panthers were going to be a fantasy juggernaut. I didn't say they were going to win all their games. They were going to be a fantasy juggernaut, not in the way that you expected either. It's going to be just consistency across the board because of the way they're going to run their offense. And Davis, I think, is kind of proves that because they just stuck Davis. I mean, we don't know much about Mike Davis like before this, and they stuck Davis into Christian McCaffrey's workload, and he is basically baby McCaffrey, but not even like he's like teenager, adolescent McCaffrey, and when McCaffrey gets back, he's obviously going to be worth the 10K that he's going to be priced at. But Davis, like, is just evidence that buy high on anyone on the Panthers. Buy high. What do you think, Brian?
I mean, I think more. Yeah, Davis is just evidence that workload is king for running backs. And that's why even a player like Davis, who I think is a decent NFL running back, he's not just a backup. He could be a starter for some teams, but he's not special. But when you get him this kind of workload, especially in the passing game, it's fantasy gold. And I think that's a symbol of it. But for the other Panthers, I mean, I do think I would buy high on Robbie Anderson. I actually think I'd buy low on David Moore or DJ Moore, excuse me.
You
But
won't be
yeah,
able to get him low though.
I don't know, especially after he just had a touchdown and 90 yards this past week. So maybe you've missed your window.
Maybe Juju. You might be able to trade Juju for DJ Moore.
Yeah, I would probably do that too. I would prefer more at this point. I like Juju in the season, but yeah, you could probably do that. And Robbie Anderson, I would target. I don't know what it would take to get him,
I'd
but
trade Tyreek Hill for Robbie Anderson.
seriously,
Oh, for real? Yeah, Tyreek Hill for Robbie Anderson, 100%. You give me the 20-point ceiling floor of Robbie Anderson to Tyreek Hill's like 12 to 30 points. I'll plug in Robbie Anderson every week. I do it in DFS. I do it in season long, and it's just a guaranteed 18 to 24 points every week. It's beautiful.
I mean, I don't know. I can't. I don't think you're crazy. Like I think Anderson is a legit top 15, maybe top 12 wide receiver. I don't think I can give up Tyreek. I mean, the Chiefs' offense is just too good. Tyreek scored a touchdown every game. That will likely regress, but it doesn't have to regress that much. He can finish the season with 12 or 13 touchdowns. That's not unheard of for a wide receiver. I mean, Devontae Adams does that. Um, I don't know. I like Tyreek's big week ability, his 34, 35-point weeks. But yeah, Anderson's definitely really good.
Yeah, but here's the thing too: is Robbie Anderson is not scoring touchdowns. You take away Tyreek's touchdowns, like the usage for Anderson is so much better than Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, but I don't
I
think
don't,
Anderson is going to score touchdowns.
I think he'll get some
Andrew,
95 yarders in there, some 95-yard catch and runs.
I mean,
He got
that's
one
my
week one.
concern is I think that to get a touchdown is that he has to break a long one from a short throw and just run after the catch because once the Panthers get in close, they give it to the running back. And if the Panthers are going for a deep shot, usually it's to DJ Moore. So for Anderson to score, he's got to carry it 80 yards to the house. He can do that. I just don't think it's going to happen often.
I guess I'm a believer. I will trade anyone, although I have both. I was to say I would trade anyone like Big Ben for Teddy Bridgewater rest of the year, straight up. But I have both on my team, so it doesn't really matter much. All right, next up, the
I mean,
Chicago
they're
Bears.
interchangeable quarterbacks.
Chicago Bears. David Montgomery is the next Ezekiel Elliott. Is that right? Is that
No,
true?
but he's getting Ezekiel Elliott's workload. I think Montgomery is a huge buy right now if you can get him. He we said this on our last podcast recapping the Thursday night game. He's getting all the work since Tariq Cohen went down and has been, targeted 6 to 8 times in each of the last 2 games. He's an absolute value play right now, given where you drafted him as barely a top 20 running back with Tariq Cohen gone and Nick Foles in the backfield with him. I think Montgomery is going to be really good. And once they start playing defenses that aren't fantastic against the run, I think he's really going to explode. He's going to be a big target for me in DFS, especially.
One thing we were talking about earlier is Allen Robinson has the most points in fantasy football so far this year.
Yeah.
Isn't that pretty great? I mean, he has Nick Foles and Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback, and he has the most points in fantasy football.
I know. And it's become a meme now about how bad his quarterbacks have been in his career. But just think about that. He went from Blake Bortles to Mitch Trubisky to Nick Foles. Nick Foles is the best quarterback that's thrown Allen Robinson the ball by a long shot in his NFL career. If he had a good quarterback thrown to him, I think he would be, I don't know, he's already kind of a household name, but even more so. I mean, he would be talked about as the best receiver in the NFL possibly because he's
I
amazing.
agree.
Done.
You put him in there with Rodgers, right? Trade him for Devonte Adams. You'd probably see him be the best receiver in the league.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Or get him Drew Brees and Drew Brees' ability to only focus on one receiver for an entire game.
God, Drew Brees is terrible.
Yeah, he looked bad again, and I was with him on this air yards thing that it doesn't really matter and he can just operate his offense. But watching the game last night against the Chargers and the fact that he just almost never threw the ball more than 10 yards downfield, it's not possible no one's ever open deep. And he was short hopping balls 8 yards down the field. He just doesn't look right. Father Time has caught him, unfortunately.
All right, next up, Cincinnati Bengals. We said it. Mixon got the same workload, just didn't get the same amount of points. Do you think this? I mean, you said workload is everything for running backs. I think he's. I mean, I'm interested. My interest is peaked with a Q.
Oh yeah, I've got both eyebrows raised at Joe Mixon. He is absolutely a buy low, and I think you can get it right now, especially after he blew up 2 weeks ago and then had a disappointing week this week. And as far as yardage is concerned, he had 24 carries and 6 catches, so getting all the volume you could possibly ask for. Was just facing the best run defense or one of the best run defenses in the NFL in Baltimore, and so he's not going to be as efficient. That's to be expected. But once he gets in better games against worse opponents, like he's going to keep exploding, and he's going to be cheap on DFS, and you're going to be able to get him cheap right now. And I definitely would. He is easily a top 8 running back going forward with this workload.
Agreed. AJ Green died the other night. Is that correct?
I mean, didn't AJ Green retire after week 2?
I remember back in what was it? Hard Knocks when they had were the Bengals on there twice? I don't remember, but that was when Zimmer was on the Bengals, and they were like decent. Um, I remember back then they were talking about AJ Green and how like he's this amazing wide receiver. He's one of the most talented in the league. He just needs to stay healthy, and it's literally been the story every year. And I think it's been what he's been in the league like what 10 years. I don't know, some ridiculous amount
Yeah,
for how
he's
little he
had a rough
plays.
go of it. Yeah,
Um,
it's unfortunate. He really was a talented guy, or is a talented guy. Just can't stay healthy.
all right, moving on. Cleveland Browns. Kareem Hunt with 23 touches, 60% of the carries. Um, I don't know. I thought he would do better. I thought he was honestly against with that matchup. I thought he would do better. So I'm not that interested, honestly.
See, I'm the
In
opposite.
DFS,
This
in
game
DFS.
went exactly how I thought it would go. This is why I faded Hunt in DFS this week because he was more expensive than Mike Davis, more expensive than Josh Jacobs, more expensive than Raheem Mostert. Hunt was facing the Colts, who are another one of the top 3 run defenses and have one of the best defensive lines. I think Hunt was benefited from the fact that the Colts, one of their best defensive players, their starting middle linebacker, was out for this game, surprisingly, or at least it was surprising when it was announced on Saturday. And Hunt performed fine, but again, it's the volume here. He got 23 touches, as you said, Steve, and got more of the workload than Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt were getting when they were both healthy. And so I think he's going to be a great play as long as Chubb is out. The question for me really is I'm not sure what you can do about it. I don't think there's a chance to buy low here. Hunt scored a touchdown. He got, you know, 18 points for you in PPR leagues this week. So it's not like he did poorly. And his
I thought it
owners are
was
going to
20.
know. Oh, maybe you get 20 points. So you got, no, it should be 18.
Oh, okay.
Um, but either way, I mean, he did fine. And so I don't think you can buy low. And I don't know that I'd pay big for him because Nick Chubb is probably coming back in a few weeks. And so I think all you can really do is just hold on Kareem Hunt right now. If you have him, you ride him. for as long as you can, and otherwise, I don't really see an opportunity to trade for him.
And the thing is for some reason all the Browns players are all super overpriced on DraftKings, and like I don't. There's. I feel like there's better options.
Yeah, there usually is, and I think a big part of it is if they had a good quarterback, their offense would be amazing, but they don't.
No, he's bad. All right, moving on. Dallas Cowboys. Uh,
You're
so
laughing, but
Dak,
that's like the saddest thing I've seen on a football field in a long time.
no. I'm laughing because like it feels like a swear word to say what Dungy said. Like
Oh yeah,
it feels.
that when Tony Dungy has, this is a blessing in disguise for the Cowboys. I don't think you could choose worse words to ask that question.
So one thing I said when he first went down to to take Tony Dungy's side and to be morbid and terrible about this um, was that before Dak got injured. Now we don't know what kind of injury it is and how long it's going to take to come back. So let's you know do the Ben
We did
Shapiro
get some of
thing.
that because I
And oh, you ruined my joke. um,
well I we do know how long he's going to come when he's going to come back now. So he had his surgery, it went well. It was a compound fracture, which just means the bone pierced the skin, and a dislocation of his ankle. And apparently, that is a 6 month recovery. When I saw it, the injury and the way he was holding his legs and his reaction, I thought this might have been a Teddy Bridgewater, Alex Smith scenario where he's out multiple years before coming back. But apparently, this is just 6 months, so he should be back in uniform next season.
all right. Well, then we have too much. We have too many facts and good information to do like a Ben Shapiro. Let's play this out, kind of bit. So I guess we'll have to. I guess what I said then applies. So what I said was that before this game, he was throwing what 500 plus yards, all the touchdowns. He was willing his team to victory. Um, and if God forbid,
He had built them.
well, yes, he willed them to one victory. Um, God forbid, uh, he comes back and is not the same person. But if he can come back and be the same person, I think this is actually good for him in contract talks. Like the Cowboys are going to realize when Andy Dalton comes in that Dak Prescott was a big part of that team. Like that was their entire team. They have no defense. Ezekiel Elliott relies on Dak Prescott to create first downs for him. Like I think that they're going to realize that they need Dak Prescott, and that'll be good for him. And hopefully he gets his money. But speaking of Andy Dalton,
Yeah, I so
do you think that helps or hurts CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup and that other guy that played for their team but didn't play last week?
yeah. Is Amari Cooper dead to you, Steve?
He is dead to me. I said when I put him in that this is going to be the week. He does absolutely nothing. Anytime I play him, he does nothing. Ugh, whatever.
I mean, that's what Cooper's been known for in his career, and why people like me, including myself, have shied away from him in season long is because he tends to have huge games and then really bottom floor games like he did this week for you in our head to head. I don't know that Andy Dalton changes things too much. I think the Cowboys are a little worse on offense. I think mainly it just means Cooper stays the same because he's the number one option on a lot of routes. And so I think he'll keep his same target share. CeeDee Lamb seems to be the outlet on most of the time, so he'll keep his target share. I think it means a little less yardage and opportunity for Michael Gallup and for any other ancillary pass catchers. But I don't think it's too big of a downgrade for Cooper or Lamb.
All right, moving on. Denver Broncos, Detroit Lions, Green Bay Packers,
Yeah, all unbiased.
Houston Texans. All right, Deshaun Watson is an okay quarterback. I mean, he's an overrated quarterback from my point of view.
So
But
so you're not buying
he went
that
over
he had
300 yards.
359 yards.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was saying, so you're not buying him then because he had over 350 yards and 3 touchdowns.
I mean, no, because I don't know what Deshaun Watson is going to come next week. Same thing that I said about last year. Like Deshaun Watson would get like 35 points, and then he'd get like 14 points, and then he'd get like 40 points, and then he'd get like 17 points. Like I have no idea what Deshaun Watson is going to show up next week. So I'm not using him anywhere.
Yeah, I think I'm a little higher on him than you, but I don't love Deshaun Watson. I think he's another quarterback that's probably going to end up being overdrafted somewhat because he went ahead of Josh Allen, for example. Some leagues he went ahead of Russell Wilson. Sometimes he even went ahead of Dak Prescott, who is now injured, but that wasn't looking good up until Dak's injury. So I'm not sure Watson's going to pay off his draft value, but he does look like he will be a situationally good quarterback for fantasy this year. Probably more of a DFS guy in high scoring games than anything else.
Do you buy the Brandon Cooks usage?
I buy that he's going to get that 2 or 3 times a year. That he
Yeah,
has it in him to have these 150-yard plus games. Um, I don't expect he's going to come do it this coming week. I think it's just a case of, as we saw, like last week against the Vikings, he did nothing. The Vikings have a bad pass secondary this week. He happened to have a really good game, and I think it just kind of evens out going forward. He's an okay flex play most weeks, but I'd probably only really trust him in games where the Texans are expected to score 28 plus points.
I agree. All right, Indianapolis Colts. Taylor's not good. T.Y. Hilton is not good. The Colts are not good. Should we move on?
Yeah, we can probably skip ahead. I do have to say I am concerned about Jonathan Taylor's workload. He again only had 12 carries, got you 57 yards and a touchdown, but only 2 catches again. The Colts seem to not trust him for whatever reason, and because of that, it doesn't look like his workload's going to get much bigger. And as we've said repeatedly, workload is king for running backs, and if he doesn't have it, he just can't be the valuable fantasy asset that we all thought he would be based on his talent. So you might be proving
Jackson,
again, Steve.
Jacksonville Jaguars. Jaguars. I don't know. How do Southern people say it? Jaguar? Jaguar? I don't know. Gardner Minshew, 301 yards. So he got you that bonus. 2 touchdowns. Is he a top 30 QB?
I mean, obviously, yes, because this is a league that started Joe Flacco in a game this year, this past week. But yeah, I think Minshew is a very high end streamer right now in season long, and definitely a worthwhile target in the right game situation in DFS. I don't think he's super exciting, but I don't see much difference or any difference between him and Bridgewater, whom you love, Steve. Explain to me why Bridgewater is this and Minshew is this, because I don't see a
Um,
difference between the two.
for those of you that can't watch it, we're actually recording this on video as well. So I had my thumbs down to Minshew, and Brian had his thumbs up, uh, impersonating me about Bridgewater. So Bridgewater is touchdown Teddy. Too much time for Teddy. He is a force. He is someone you want to believe in and root for. Gardner Minshew is probably a proud boy, little like annoying
Oh,
frat guy
okay.
that I will never cheer for. Uh, I don't I don't care for him
No,
as
no,
a
no.
person. I don't care for him as a football player. He's very inconsistent, has a very low floor. Teddy does not have that low of a floor. His floor and ceiling are about equal. So yes, I will take Teddy over Minshew in real life and in fantasy any day of the week. Go ahead, Brian.
Okay, so first of all, I'm not sure that anyone, me, our listeners, Gardner Minshew's family, appreciate you associating him with white supremacists. And
Oh,
I don't
didn't you
think he's
hear?
that.
Haven't you heard? that Proud Boys are not white supremacists. They're a very racially inclusive group of people. Haven't you
I'm
heard
sure
this?
they all happen to be white men. No, I've turned off. I'm done. I know who I'm voting for, and I know what I'm doing if the person I'm voting for doesn't win. I'm leaving the country. So no, I disagree. I mean, Minshew has had 3 games where he had over 300 yards and multiple touchdowns. One of the other 2 games where he didn't achieve that, he still had 3 touchdown passes. I think he's got a great floor. I think he's pretty much exactly the same as Teddy. They're both great streaming options. They're both good DFS plays depending on their price and their matchup.
Let's move on before you make a fool of yourself. Kansas City Chiefs. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the great vaunted rookie, Brian's I think #1 pick overall last week for anything DFS, had 10 carries for 40 yards, 3 catches for 40 yards. That's not bad. He had 8 targets. Um, Brian, speak. Defend your boy.
I don't know why you've got to make it sound like he's my boy when he's a guy that I liked about the same as the rest of the world. And he's one player I found myself going back and forth between how much I like him, I will admit, mainly because the hype around him and this offense make you think that the starting running back should be highly valuable, when in reality he's been pretty mediocre so far. And this is another game that kind of scares me more than previous ones had because the Chiefs lost this game. They were up big in the first half and they needed to score a lot. And despite all those circumstances where a running back should do well with his team ahead by 2 touchdowns or with his team in a close game needing to pound out a last drive, or for pass catching running back, his team needing to score a lot, and he didn't produce at all during this game. Um, he's not getting used on third down a ton. He doesn't get used on the goal line much. The Chiefs seem to prefer to do jet sweeps and little bump passes to Tyreek Hill and Mecole Hardman that I think CEH is going to be an overpriced, overhyped guy for a lot of the season, and I'm going to try to fade him until I see his role change.
Yeah, I mean, I've been fading him since the preseason. So, um,
For you.
Sammy Watkins injured his hamstring. I mean, I don't play Sammy Watkins, but Mecole Hardman might be a waiver wire pickup. The hard man himself.
I thought you'd bite harder on that bait, Steve. I thought you'd be all in on Hardman after your love of him in the preseason.
I thought Watkins was not going to be a factor this season, and I thought Hardman would take his role. Um, I was wrong, so hopefully this proves me right. I mean, Watkins always gets injured anyway, so I think it's his opportunity to take a part of this offense because after how much they used Kelsey last week, he probably needs a little bit of a break.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hardman's a decent ad on the waiver wire if you need some wide receiver depth. But I had actually put this in there to caution that once Watkins left this game, we actually saw a lot more of Denard Robinson and even saw some Byron Pringle, the Chiefs' other wide receivers. And I think what could very well happen is Hardman will keep his exact same role because he's used most often just to stretch the defense on the other side of the field from Tyreek Hill and to pressure the safeties. And if he gets used that way, I don't know if his role changes. It's possible he gets more targets with Watkins out, but I wouldn't be, going out of my way or dropping a really solid player to get him just because Watkins, on the one hand, has a different role in the offense that will be filled, and on the other hand, should be back in just a few weeks. This isn't a major injury.
All right, let's move on. Las Vegas Raiders. Oh, Las Vegas now. Nice. Um, is it Henry Ruggs? Am I
It is.
saying that? Okay. Okay. He had 2 catches for 118 yards and 1 touchdown. Brian wants me to feign interest. So, good job. Good job, little rookie. Let's move on.
I'm buying Ruggs. I like him a lot. I think even better days are ahead. Maybe not. I mean, score wise, this was a great game, but obviously the 3 targets and just 2 catches isn't the type of volume that can lead to sustainable fantasy production. But I believe in his skill set, in his role in this offense. I think he will be a fantasy factor in the second half of the season.
Maybe we'll see. Los Angeles Chargers. Keenan Allen's injured. Uh, I told you, by the way, I told you that Justin Jackson was going to get more of the work than Joshua Kelly. I watched 3 plays of this game, and one of them was a Justin Jackson run. He looks pretty good. He looks fresh. I will say he looks like he has fresh legs, and he wants to hit people hard. That's what I'll say. So he might be good for a couple
Yeah, to be
games.
honest, I thought both Jackson and Kelly both looked fine. I actually thought Kelly looked a little quicker and more explosive, which is why I was surprised that he didn't get more of the receiving work in this game because Jackson did look like the better between the tackles runner to me. But it seems like Jackson has the role. He's probably the back you want going forward while Eckler is out. That being said, I don't know that I love either guy. I don't think either guy is much more than a flex play or a very low end RB2 if you're desperate.
I would definitely pick him up off the waivers, yeah, for flex RB2, especially considering what's going on with COVID. Um,
That's a good point.
LA Rams, Cam Akers, who? Henderson, who? Brown, who? I don't care. I said don't play
Yeah,
any
I
of
don't.
them.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like Daryl Henderson had another good game. He got 2 touchdowns despite not doing a whole lot yardage wise, less than 70 yards combined receiving and rushing. But I just don't trust it going forward. I don't think it's predictable. I definitely don't think any one of these running backs is going to average a touchdown a week. So yeah, I'm just kind of off the Rams backfield for now. I'll let someone else deal with that headache.
And I should say I'm not playing any of them. I should say in DFS I'm not playing any of them. In season long, I said last game play any of them. But for moving forward, if you have Brown, I wouldn't bother. Play Akers and Henderson because it's probably between them the coin flip in flex. And if Henderson can't do it again next week, then just don't play any of them. You know, I don't know. All right, Everett and Higby.
Sure.
Didn't Everett get all those catches in like the first like 1.5 quarters?
I think you're right about that. But my point here was just to show that Gerald Everett, had the big game this week, had 90 yards receiving to Tyler Higbee's 12. But the bigger issue here is a lot of people were high on Higbee going into the season. I think he was often the 7th tight end off the board in drafts in August, and he's just not getting the role that he needs to succeed in that. He's being used to block way more than he is being used to catch passes, and so Higbee is droppable. Higbee should not be used in DFS, especially because he still seems to be priced kind of high after his 1 3 touchdown fluke game. But I want nothing to do with either of those tight ends, and I just think that needs to get out there more. It's not being talked about, but Tyler Higbee was a huge bust as far as where he was drafted and where he was recommended by a lot of the touts out there.
Who's the quarterback for the Rams? The big white guy.
Jared, Jared Goff,
Jared Goff. All right. Do you know who Jared Goff reminds me of?
Subway Jared,
No. He's like a bad version of Justin Herbert.
a little bit. I was almost gonna say
They're about the same height.
I thought you were gonna go with a bad version of Kirk Cousins.
Oh, that would be mean to Jared Goff. I would never put him in the same category as that. You know what? If he dies, he dies. So
I can't even get mad at you for saying that because he said it about himself. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on now. We're going off the rails
uh,
here.
Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, they put in Tua because Fitzpatrick couldn't get it done against a really good defense. So it's time for Tua. Um, that's what you were saying, Brian, right? We might see Tua this week.
Yeah, what's going to happen? This game went more sideways than any other prediction I've made this entire year, including the offseason. I thought the 49ers would be a good NFL team and win at home with their opponents traveling 3,000 miles. But nope, Ryan Fitzmagic came in and decimated the 49ers while Jimmy G looked terrible. I don't even want to put a pun on it because he was just awful and got benched. Shouldn't have started the game. Apparently, was too injured to do it. And yeah, I mean, kudos to Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's going to keep playing. And like I said, though, I don't know when Tua is going to start now. I think you can ride Fitzpatrick for a while. The Dolphins have a really easy schedule coming up, and I think they're going to win a lot more games than people might expect.
Book it here, but you heard it here. That next game, Fitzpatrick is not going to have 8 to 12 fantasy points. That's what I would project. 8 to 12 fantasy points next game. All right, moving on. The Minnesota Vikings. Dalvin Cook had a small tweak, according to Zimmer. Let's see, Brian, do you get that joke? You weren't laughing.
Yeah, Daniil Hunter also had a
Yes.
small tweak and has missed this entire season so far, and apparently might need neck surgery and might be out for the year or longer. So yeah, don't trust what Mike Zimmer says about injuries. The fact that Zimmer downplayed it made me think Dalvin Cook is probably missing week 6, if not more, with this groin injury.
So what I saw from Madison, I mean, he looked pretty good. He didn't look bad. Um, he looked good. He didn't. He's not as smooth on his feet as Dalvin Cook, but very few are. He runs more into people, and he's not very good at breaking tackles. But he can catch. He can hit some holes, and the Vikings will probably use him a lot. So I don't like him as much as Mike Davis because I don't think he's going to get used quite as well in the passing game. Um, but if we're like comparing big backups, I would prefer Davis over Madison, but Madison's close.
Yeah, I think that's a great comparison. I think Madison comes in and does 85% Dalvin Cook. Like you said, I think the biggest reason people will be down on Madison is just he doesn't look as electric as Dalvin Cook does, which, as you said, very few people do. Maybe two, maybe Alvin Kamara and Christian McCaffrey are as electric as Dalvin Cook, and that's it in the NFL as far as running backs are concerned. But Alexander Madison is definitely a starting level of running back. And I agree. I don't think he's going to get the passing volume that Mike Davis does, so he won't be as valuable. But he's going to have a lot of touches with Cook out and will be a definite starter this week against the Falcons, assuming Cook is out, and will be one in probably all my lineups in DFS. Prices haven't come out for some reason, salaries on DFS yet, but I assume Madison will be between 5 and 6K or barely over 6K. And at that price, I would play him in 100% of my lineups against the Falcons.
Um, Randy Moss Sr. was held to only 3 catches and 23 yards on 5 targets, whereas Adam Thielen had 9 catches for 80 yards and 2 targets. I said,
And
like it's kind of a cop out. It's kind of a cop out. What I said. I said if the game is close, Thielen gets a lot of points. Fade Jefferson. If the game is not close, Jefferson gets a lot of points and Thielen gets an average amount of points. But the game was very close, and they just did not trust Jefferson the way that they trust Thielen in close games like that.
Yeah, I definitely think there was some of that in the game, mainly not from like the scheme or the plays called, but just that in crunch time, Kirk Cousins looks for Adam Thielen. He, Thielen around the goal line or in the end zone is magic. and that's what Cousins goes for. And so yeah, Jefferson had a quiet night. I think this will happen from time to time. I still really like Justin Jefferson. I still think he's a solid wide receiver 3 or flex in season long, and on DFS will be a good play a lot of weeks.
New, moving on, New England Patriots have a bye. New Orleans Saints. Emmanuel Sanders got chucked the ball a lot of times, and now we should all pick him up off the waiver wire. Do you think? Right? I mean, what are we supposed to do here? I'm not going to play him in DFS next week. I missed out on it this week, although you would only be playing the Monday games. But what do you do with that? Nothing.
Yeah, I mean, unless Michael Thomas keeps punching teammates, he's probably going to come back at some point, and I think he takes his role back. Sanders probably has carved out a decent size workload, which I mean like 4 to 5 targets a game, but that's for NFL purposes. That's good for fantasy, not so much. I'm probably off Emmanuel Sanders even after these last 2 games that were pretty good by him. Once Michael Thomas comes back.
I'm not one for promoting violence or promoting like toxic alpha male culture or promoting just shut up and play, don't talk politics. I'm definitely not that type of person at all. But Michael Thomas, just shut up. Just shut up and play football. It
Well,
seems
yeah,
like he's
for
itching
he's
for a fight, like he's lonely.
yeah. I
It's
don't. It's like he's mad that they had the audacity to rest him to get healthy, and I don't get it. I just
I
I
don't
don't
even
get what behind the scenes in New Orleans.
I don't even care if New Orleans wins. Like if they lose every game, if they win every game, I don't care. But Michael Thomas like showing up on my news feed for being benched because he punched someone else, like that's one less thing I need on my news feed. I don't care. Go away, Michael Thomas, or play football, or start talking politics again. Fine, but just play football or talk politics, or stop being a baby.
just hit just just don't hit your teammates.
All right, moving on. New York Giants. Danny Dimes. It's Danny Dimes because he gets 1/10 of what people project him to get. Darius Slayton.
You were so
Um,
joke.
Darius Slayton is going to be good the next time the Giants play the Cowboys. Other than that, whatever. Um, I don't know. So like he did okay at the beginning of the year. He just keeps going up and down. I just don't want to have him be like 5,800 and play him and have him get like 4 to 6 points, you know? And it seems like that's what he's capable of. I'd rather spend 5,800 and play, I don't know. I can't even think of someone off the top of my head, but that seems like the way
Robbie
Darius Slayton's
Anderson has been.
going. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I yeah, he's definitely a boomer bust guy. I think you can. I trust him a little bit more after this performance because he looks really good. I mean, he looks legit. I just think it's his quarterback and this offense that are holding him back from being an every week type play. But if the Giants are playing a bad pass defense, I'd feel comfortable starting him in season long, and I'll probably play him in DFS somewhat. But yeah, he is not going to be the reliable every week guy that someone like Robbie Anderson is because you just can't trust Slayton's workload.
Devonta Freeman got what 18 touches? No, 19 touches for about 80 something yards and a touchdown against the Cowboys. So not sure that I'm interested in him at all against any other team. Cowboys are just that bad.
What about, because I kind of like Devonta Freeman, what about him versus any of the Rams running backs in season long?
None of the above. Oh wait, in season long?
What about, yeah,
Mm, can I say low end flex?
sure, we can go that route.
I would put no. If I have Devonta Freeman on my team, I'm probably gonna play him. Actually, no, I wouldn't. Actually, I have my team is stacked. I'm in first place and everything. I wouldn't. I don't need him. Um, but if I had a bad team like Brian's,
I
I
love
would probably like.
these questions.
If I had a bad team like
I
Brian's
love
and
how you answer.
I dropped Gibson, and couldn't pick him back up, I'd probably play Freeman as my RB2.
I'll try this again. I love that you answer these, how would you handle a player questions based purely from one of your fantasy teams that you manage, and just pretend like that's all that matters out there.
Brian,
I have Freeman and
not everyone has a whole bunch of fantasy teams. A lot of people just have one or two. And when you're someone like myself that has one or two and you win them all the time, that's a credible source.
I'm not denying your credibility. I just like how that's the lens through which all your commentary comes through. I like Freeman. I'd put him in the same kind of level as like Miles Gaskin, and don't think he's too far behind. For example, Todd Gurley or Jonathan Taylor right now with the workload Taylor's getting. And I'd put him ahead of the Rams running backs or anyone in Baltimore's backfield, including Mark Ingram. Like Freeman's not untalented, and he's getting a workload, so I think he's got some value.
All right, we're running long. We got to move through this. Okay,
Yeah.
New York Jets. Crowder is a low end RB2 flex. Um, right?
I mean, I think he's above that. He's gotten over 10 targets and over 100 yards in all three games he's played this season. I think he's a legit top 15 receiver. Given that he had one of those games with Joe Flacco throwing him the ball, I think that we've seen that he can produce in even the worst circumstances. So I think he's another underdrafted guy and is going to be quite valuable going forward.
Okay, so put him on your radar for DFS.
Yep.
Um, the Eagles. I really like this Travis Fulgham guy. I watched him play. He is he is a fantastic player. He reminds me like you just plug him into Alshon Jeffrey's role, and he'll be a young Alshon Jeffrey. That's what he looked like. He looked like a young Alshon Jeffrey. Big, good hands, can catch contested balls, can run good routes. Yeah, I would absolutely target him number one overall in the waivers, and even next week because Wentz doesn't really care who is guarded or not. He'll just throw the ball. He's not that good, and Travis Fulgham seems to come down with it all the time. So yeah, he was good. Eye test good.
I have not watched this game yet, so I can't judge the eye test, but I am not fully on board. I do think Fulgham is the receiver to own in Philadelphia as long as Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey are out. It's not really clear how long those two will be missing, but once they come back, I think Fulgham returns to the practice squad or at minimum, at best, becomes like the fourth option on this team. So I'm not as high as you are, but there are worse ads out there, and Fulgham will be interesting in DFS depending on how high his price goes up after this monstrous performance.
He looked way better than Chase Claypool as
Wow.
just a wide receiver.
That is both a good segue into the Steelers and a hot take against the guy that lit up the fantasy world with 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, so Chase Claypool just got like he seemed to be it was it was like the other team was guarding everyone but Chase Claypool, and so Big Ben was just like, I get, I guess I'll just throw it to Chase Claypool, and over and over and over again, it just seemed like he got game flowed into like a massive game. Like everyone else was covered. Chase Claypool was never covered, and yeah, it that was crazy and
Yeah,
annoying
and
because
what's
I had
crazy
Juju.
is when he was covered, he was being covered by Darius Slay, who's supposed to be a really good cornerback, but did not look good in this game. I think here again, I would add Claypool over Fulgham because the Steelers have shown through several years, and Big Ben has always shown he can support multiple fantasy valuable wide receivers. And Claypool, while won't become the excuse me, my cat is trying to eat my cords. Become the number one or two guy if Deontay Johnson returns to health. He'll still have a role going forward, and he looks dynamic. I prefer him over any Eagles wide receiver, and I think he's definitely a must add this week, though I wouldn't obviously expect repeats of this performance.
Let's move on. Um, I'm not interested in talking about Juju. You got to hold on to him. San Francisco
He's on your team.
49ers. San Francisco 49ers. I said at the beginning of the year, you didn't buy it, that Raheem Mostert is your RB2. If you have him on your team, he is an RB2 all year long. And this guy is, I thought he looked okay last year in the playoffs. I was like, yeah, he looks good. He just seems like he's benefiting from a good line. And but no, he's legit. He is a good player, and he can break off long runs, even though he doesn't look shifty. Um, yeah, I really like Raheem Mostert.
Yeah, I do too. I don't think I ever questioned that he could be an RB2. I just wasn't sure he'd get enough of a workload. My question for you, though, Steve, is garage or garbage on your boy Jet McKinnon?
Garbage.
Wow, you just cut bait and run the second you see some adversity. I
Yeah,
agree
but
with you.
here's the thing: if it's a 10 team league, you'll be able to pick him up again. In a bigger league, there's a chance you might be able to pick him up again. But like if somebody picks him up and he doesn't play well, you just screwed over that other team. I don't know. That's I like garbage either way, big league or smaller league. All right, moving on. We got the Seattle Seahawks. You know what? I would say between Metcalf and Lockett, Lockett's got the higher ceiling, but Metcalf seems to be the sure high floor guy moving forward. Minusing the touchdowns, he seems to get the share of like the first down targets, the move the chains targets, the tough catch targets, and Lockett is just the um, what is it? The over the top guy.
I think it's the opposite of that, but I think your call on Metcalf being the better receiver or the better option going forward is correct. Um, I think Metcalf's only going to get better. This is only his second year in the NFL, and he's already developing a great rapport with Russell Wilson. I think we just see Metcalf take over a bigger and bigger role, and Metcalf becomes Thielen and Lockett is Jefferson, where Thielen you can count on almost every week, and in the really close big moments, he's going to get the ball. So that will be Metcalf versus Lockett. We'll have some big weeks, some weeks that are bigger than Metcalf's, but in close games or more often than not will kind of disappear into the background and just have a mediocre game for you. I'm starting to think that's the way this season is going to unfold for the Seahawks, and I would definitely take Metcalf over Lockett going forward.
All right, moving on. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Rojo's the real deal when he's not fumbling the ball. I really like Rojo and DFS if there's a lot of injuries. So right now we've got OJ Howard out. We've got Godwin is probably out. If there's ever a time where like Fournette is out or Vaughn is out and or uh, um, Evans is banged up, I really like Ronald Jones in DFS. Other than that, I just I'd stick with him in season long unless he's cheap on DFS. What do you think about Tyler Johnson or my Rojo take?
I agree on Rojo. I think he's another guy. I don't know. I'd go out of my way to target in a trade, or that and I certainly wouldn't drop him. But I think he is what he is, and he's going to get you decent volume as long as Leonard Fournette for sure is injured and or isn't performing well. And Tyler Johnson did look good. I think, unfortunately for him, he goes back to the bench once Godwin gets healthy because the Buccaneers already have three good receivers in Godwin, Evans, and Scotty Miller, who Tom Brady likes a lot. But Johnson definitely looked like the real deal. He's definitely a guy to stash in dynasty leagues and someone to keep an eye on if there are any more serious injuries with the Buccaneers wide receivers.
Yeah, definitely agree. Yeah, he absolutely looked like um, a solid 2-star level wide receiver for the future of this game. That's just a homer and us talking though. All right, next up, Tennessee Titans. Who cares? I don't care about them. Go away.
I care about the
Washington.
trend for the season.
Yeah, well, just make them forfeit all their games and then give the other team wins.
That would be
The
nice.
Washington football team, Alex Smith returns, so that means Brian is super high on uh, that one tight end that everyone in the Twitterverse
Thomas.
loves. Yeah,
No, I'm starting to give up on Logan Thomas. He's not even getting the volume anymore. So I don't know what that was. That was just a small sample aberration, I guess, at the beginning of the year. Uh, but my only takeaway is just really happy to see Alex Smith come back and be on the field. I've been rooting for him for a long time, like even before his injury. I thought he's gotten kind of a bad shake in the NFL throughout his career, and glad to see him come back and healthy. And even if he doesn't do anything, fantasy wise or statistically, it's good to know that he's recovered from that terrible, leg fracture. So it's just, congrats to him. And that's really all I have to say about Washington because there's nothing else to talk about.
I don't know. Based on how bad their offensive line is, he might get another season-ending injury before the season is over.
I hope
He was
not, but
pretty
you're
rough.
not wrong. I mean, I think he got sacked 5 times in half a game.
All right. There is no Thursday night football this game. That has been moved to Monday night. Is that yesterday, Monday, or next week, Monday?
No, next Monday.
Next Monday. Okay.
So next Monday
That's
we
been
have a
moved.
doubleheader.
Oh, going MLB on the bit. All right. Um, so I am Steven, and that is Brian. Um, yeah, we're also videotaping this at the same time, so that's why that was weird. Check us out at dailyfantasyweekly.com for weekly articles. Podcasts will be up there as well too. You can find us at TryHardFF on Twitter, and we will see you again in a couple days for our Week 6 preview show. I feel like I should say peace out or something.
Stay safe.